We are live on the Gamification Revolution. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Gabe Zichermann. I'm so excited to be with you. There's Maarten Molenaar joining us now from
Hello,
Utrecht in the Netherlands. Hi, Maarten.
hello. How you doing?
Woohoo! So glad you're here. And I'm very pleased. Another sunny, if cold day in New York City, but not dampening our spirits in any way as we get closer to spring. And as we get closer to spring, we're also getting closer to Gamification Summit, to G Summit, which, as you guys know, is this amazing event. It's happening in June, June 10th through the 13th. gsummit.com. You can use the code GAMREV to save $200 off your ticket. At the show, you will see a whole bunch of cool people, including Maarten, who's going to be talking about his project. We're going to learn a little bit more about what he's working on today. Myself, 50 plus other speakers, and some of you may have seen our announcement from earlier this week that Professor BJ Fogg from Stanford's Persuasive Design department is joining us as a featured keynote and also giving a great workshop on the first day of the event on June the 10th, and it promises to be beyond exciting. I'm so stoked. And you guys don't even know there's a whole bunch of other speakers we haven't announced yet, including some more keynotes coming up next week. So there's lots of cool stuff going on. Now, if it's your first time joining us on the Gamification Revolution, I'm so glad you're here, but you're going to need to log in. Log in with your social media accounts to the Spreecast platform. Click the button, log in, authenticate, and then you can join the amazing chat. You can ask Maarten and I questions, and you can even come on screen if you'd like and ask us questions. You can ask all these questions by clicking these buttons that you see around you, and you're definitely going to want to interact with your peers. And for those of you who are regulars here, welcome back. Seamus, I see you, and Michael and David, and so nice to have you all here. And any of you that I'm not catching right away, great to have you. Welcome back. Okay, so let's get started. So Maarten, tell us about the project that you've been working on that's related to gamification at Rabobank.
Well, actually, Gabe, there are numerous projects. What I'm running within Rabobank is what I call the Gamification Hub. This is a sort of an internal network where I try to bring together all these different projects within which are using gamification to make sure that they're learning from each other and that they pass on these lessons learned. Um, as a bank, of course, with 50,000 employees, we're a very wide organization, so there's gamification happening in all different kinds of levels and with different kind of people. So I try to, well, sort of melt us all together to one good initiative, so we can learn from each other. So that's
So
basically
that,
my job. Yeah.
yeah, so that's very interesting, right? And kind of one of the things that I've often talked about, Maarten, is this idea that once gamification gets more serious, companies are going to need to have someone who's really the knowledge owner, the discipline owner inside the organization. And I know that many of the people who follow the space would love to be that person inside their company. Can you tell
Yeah.
us how you did that? How did you get to this point of being able to start a
Yeah.
gamification hub and have that be like your main focus?
Well, the first gamification application we had was concerning our mortgage process. And I'm not going to bore you all with mortgages, of course, but what we did, we used gamification to engage people more with the mortgage process, to activate them to upload documents online and to help them with applying for the mortgage. And that worked very well. We used gamification in there, and people were very enthusiastic. And that was sort of the starting point where people realized, wow, gamification can actually add value to a business. It's not just gaming anymore. It's not just for training anymore. We can really integrate this with our business. And then what you see is that all these different projects pop up, and they start try to well, they sort of try to reinvent the wheel because we're a very large organization, and sometimes on the left side we don't know what we're doing on the right side. So what I realized by if we want to repay all that learning money again and again and again, that would be a waste of money. So I said, okay, there's a business case here. If we can create one spot to combine all these projects to make sure that they can learn from each other, we actually save money. So that was the first step, just to show that actually my the money I spent for my job it was worth it because they were saving money by integrating all these projects. And second step, of course, was to make sure that it's not only my thing, but also other people's thing. So by setting up all these initiatives within the education. So to answer your question, first thing I did was build a business case and show people what's worth it.
So, but you have to have a success first. And I know that you
Yeah,
you were sort of concerned. You're sort of concerned about boring us with that success, but it's not boring to us at all. What was that
yeah.
first project at Rabobank, and how were you involved in that?
Okay, well, the first project was normally when people get a mortgage, they go to the local bank office, they say, I want a mortgage, and we need a lot of documents, over 20 documents. People need to read, well, pretty boring information and prepare themselves for a mortgage consultation, which is a consultation with an advisor on our office. What we want to do is to bring that process online because it costs a lot of money if people bring us the 20 documents. We need to scan these documents in, put them in the system. There's a lot of back office work there. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that our customers, they're not really engaged with that process. So once they get to that consultation, which costs them money, they have to pay about 1,200 euros for a consultation. They don't really know what to talk about. So we said we do that whole process online, and people need to prepare themselves online. But if you ask customers, all right, come online, upload 20, 30 documents for us, read all this boring information, that's of course not, they're not doing that by themselves. So what we implemented, we took that whole mortgage process and we broke it down a little small pieces, small levels. And at first, they have to they have to fill out some small information about their income, about the price of the house they want to buy. And by adding more information and giving us more information, we unlock more functionalities within that mortgage process. So every time they give us information, we give them a more precise indication about how much they can probably loan. So that back and forth mechanism is working, and every time every time they bring us information, we provide them new information. But secondly, also because they are saving us money by preparing this by themselves, by uploading these documents themselves. So we give them an incentive back. So everyone who uses this online mortgage process gets a 450 euros discount on that consultation because that's only fair. They do something for us, we do something. And during the process, you get feedback on your process by feedback indicators, progress bars, which give you that sense of productivity, like you're really building up your own uh, house, as you say, which is a good preparation for that consultation itself. And what we saw as the effect is that um, over 90% of our people started using that online process instead of bringing all the work to our offices. And secondly, in the consultations consultations themselves, people were more engaged in the conversation because now they know what they're talking about, and it's not just a bank selling a mortgage to a customer, but really an interaction between customer and bank, knowing what they're talking about together and making good plans for the future. So that's a really nice success process.
And so this, I mean, you talk about 90% of people doing it, and we actually hear in the chat, folks are sort of talking about how, uh, how breaking it down into the smaller tasks is such a big win, and that's
Yeah,
a kind of obvious thing. I mean, that sounds like a colossal win, Martin. So wouldn't any
yeah,
organization after that turn around and say, "Oh yeah, well let's do that all over the place"? Were
yeah.
you kind of so how do we take that from, how do we take that from that point to Gamification Hub? What's the steps that took place to get from there to now?
Well, can I make one small response about the
Sure.
direction you got from the chat?
Yeah.
Of course, breaking it down doesn't sound very well, it's very innovative or very interesting. But the thing you have to understand is that these things are very complex, and our customers, they don't want a mortgage, they want a house, and the mortgage is the nasty thing they need to get past to get that house. And by breaking it down to small pieces, which are very easy to digest, we made that whole process more engaging. So going from that mortgage example to the gamification hub, what I did, all right, I'm going to make sure that we learn from this example, that we are re-implementing it on other places in the bank. And also what I'm doing is I'm providing training for our user experience consultants, but also for other people in the bank to come up with ideas for gamification themselves, which is a model I sort of learned from Mario Herger from his time at SAP, and he helped me to start implementing it in Rabobank. So one example is what I'm doing now. I'm organizing open workshops, which are gamification design workshops um, for everyone within the bank, and people have to bring their own problem or their own subject which they want to gamify. It has to be a behavior subject with a behavior issue, of course, because it's seen as a behavior change. And within that workshop, I go to go through a high level design steps of gamification, and it's a 4 or 5 hour workshop. And in the end, they go home with their own small first concept, which they're going to uh, discuss with the colleagues. And well, not in all cases, of course, but in a lot of cases, they come back to me and say, "All right, we started with this, now we're here, and can you help us further?"
So here's a question for you.
That's
Is that
yeah.
been easy? Has that been easy or hard to get people inside the organization to get on board with this idea and to spend this time with you and take the workshops? And can you talk a little bit about the scale of this? How many people are interested in this kind of thing?
The skill, well, in 1 year of workshops, I trained over 100 people,
Awesome.
which are people who are spending 4 or 5 hours of their job to be here, and afterwards they spend evenings to work out their ideas. Um, and the enthusiasm of gamification within the organization is, of course, not everyone is enthusiastic, but a lot of them are. And these people, I help them to show their colleagues how they can add value with gamification by using showcases from outside or within the bank, and to really help them to not just how can they build a gamification solution, but also how can they engage their own stakeholders with it. And of course, there are outside there are some examples of gamification also in banking which don't really work. I personally don't believe that just adding points, badges, and leaderboards is the solution. And I get a lot of suppliers here in the Netherlands who are trying to do just that. So that's kind of difficult, and which also makes it difficult to sell the concept inside my own organization because they see these examples and they're not really enthusiastic about it. But yeah, well, it takes time and it takes energy, and I think that most of my work is being sort of an ambassador and a project manager trying to well put all these things together, give a lot of workshops. But in the end, you get a few good sponsors, a few good people who believe within it, and there are some high managers here in Rabobank who really have shown their vision on gamification and really show that they believe in it, which really helps. And from there on, I can go.
So why do you think it's important to have this central resource in the first place? Like obviously it's something that you care a lot about. You've been at G Summit before as an attendee. You know, you're going to be
Mhm.
back speaking again this year at the event, talking about your experience. Why did you think this was important instead of just, setting up a web page and telling everyone, hey, here's what gamification is all about?
Yeah. Well, I saw a danger, and the danger was that we see gamification and we grasp just the top of it, try to do some project, and it fails, and we just say, "All right, this doesn't work," and we go on. And the thing is, it's really hard work figuring out what gamification does. Well, you know, you know best that it is not easy to gamify things, and it takes time and it takes energy to really hit that spot. Right, this is working for us. And well, gamification within my organization is still sometimes considered as a hype. And well, if a hype doesn't work, people get satisfied and go on. And I couldn't let that happen. So that's why I thought, yeah, now we need to have one person who stands for it and well keeps the fire going. So that's why it's very important that it is something that a person does. On the other hand, I'm also very busy not to be Mr. Gamification. Of course, people see me as Mr. Gamification, but by setting up that virtual network and really start up communication within other departments and colleagues with each other, I sort of try to work to a moment where I can step out of the train and the organization has come up to a new level of dollars where they can go on by themselves. So um, I set a goal for myself that it takes I'll take 2 years as a gamification promoter ambassador, and within these 2 years, other people have to pay the work for.
Yeah, obviously, in the end, they've got to do the actual work, right? And that's so much more
Yeah, yeah,
scalable. So one of the questions from
yeah,
Philippe, which I think is a little bit more meta, and we're going to get back to talking about, this, but I'm curious to know, your personal philosophy and certainly what you've done at
yeah.
Rabobank. How do you balance off the gamification stuff with the overall user experience stuff? How are those two things related? And this is a good question from Philippe that we get very commonly,
Yeah,
especially since gamification is maybe the bright, shiny object that many people are looking
yeah.
at and saying, "Oh, this will solve all of our problems." How do we balance off those two things in the process of solving our challenges?
Well, first and foremost, gamification started within our IT group here in Rabobank. And they've seen these examples. Of course, a lot of IT developers are gamers themselves, so they sort of saw their chance to really show that this is working. Um, so usually, when a project was already designed in on a concept level, then in at the IT part they said, all right, maybe you can add these small gamification elements to gamify it. But that isn't enough, of course, because we're talking about engagement, engagement with your customers, engagement with your employees. So you really have to start at the beginning of the chain. So what I'm trying to do now is not just to educate our developers or our user experience consultants, but also our business people, the marketers, the people who design the projects, the formulas, to really have them think about these mechanisms. Like the mechanism I spoke before within the mortgages, that was a point where they really decided, all right, we're going to bring in a mechanism, incentives. If people do something for us, we give them something back. And it wasn't just an IT or user experience decision, it was really a business decision. And I think that the decisions about gamification should be made over there and not just at the part where the IT department or user experience center, in my case, comes in.
So very interesting. So there's a question from Sean, or kind of a comment from Sean. He's talking about how gamification, or from Seamus. I'm sorry, thanks Seamus for that. I
Yeah.
don't know why Sean got stuck in my head. But so from Seamus, this question about gamification being transferable, and he's talking about that. It's exciting for him, and I think for many people to talk about best practices and really
Yeah.
how we transfer best practices to specific industries. What are some of the
Yeah.
best practices that you've come up with that you're focused on a lot inside Rabobank, maybe specifically for finance or for folks in really large organizations like you?
And do you mean a best practice on how to design gamification or a best practice on how to implement it within the organization?
Well, I think either of the things that pop up
Both?
for you, but the organizational side, to be fair, for folks who work in big companies, the organizational implementation is usually the bigger
Yeah,
problem for them. So I'm sort of curious.
yeah, yeah, of course. Well, what really works is, of course, an example which has shown the added value, and that was, in my case, the mortgage case. If you don't have that, that you really have to get cases from outside your organization and not just show, all right, this has increased engagement by 5 or 10%, but really try to get those long-term results because that's where people are interested in. Um, but you can't always bring the ROI or anything on gamification. We're still in the early stage, so you really have to make people believe in it. And what I did is give loads and loads and loads of presentations, also in my free time in the evenings, give workshops, and have people connect to that inner part of themselves and where they can understand play. I get a lot of people say, well, I don't like gamification because I don't play anymore. And I start asking them questions. All right, what are you doing when you're waiting for a traffic light? Are you trying to hit the accelerator right at the right moment and when it's green? Or are you trying to beat your TomTom or your route planner just to be 2 minutes earlier than you're supposed to be at your location? So I try to make them have them make that connection to gaming themselves and have them experience it. And that sometimes is really small, but if you have these few people, you have to find the influences within your organization. I myself started as a trainee within our innovation department. There was an innovation manager, and together we sort of started experimenting with gamification. We used interns and we used students just to, because we had to do it low cost, just to try some things out. And that hit the spark at a few people, and they say, "Oh, wow, maybe you can do something with that." So it might sound a bit like a cliche because it's like any innovation, you have to sort of get a small group of ambassadors going, but that's still the way. Um, Another thing is like these workshops I talked about before. I don't really expect people to really know how to design gamification by just doing my workshop. That's not the case. I let them experience that whole design process of gamification just by so they can understand what's in there and what's gamification like, but also have them understand that it's not all new. I mean, gamification is new, but a lot of it, which is in there, is behaviorism, motivational psychology. These are competences which are all sometimes present in your current organization, but it's just not organized as such. So by having them connect gamification with practices they already know, they can sort of start to do the work themselves. And if you don't know how to, well, maybe set up a workshop or something, just try out what is already out there. I mean, Gabe has his workshop. You have the gamification Coursera. You have the Udemy workshop of Mario Herker. These are open sources which can really help you to educate your own people. That's what I did. Not just stealing your workshop, Gabe, of course.
No, no, it's great. One of the open questions too. So we do a bunch of work. I do a bunch of work with financial
Yeah,
services institutions. And so one of the things that kind of often comes up is these extra challenges related to two particular things. One is being in a heavily regulated environment, right? That
yeah,
often,
yeah,
you guys have lots of rules you need to follow in order to be able to do stuff.
yeah,
And the second piece of it is that in a big organization like Rabobank having 50,000 employees, which is in the banking world actually, but not even that big. You have lots of projects that are happening potentially all over the company already. So maybe when you surface as the gamification hub guy inside Rabobank, suddenly people are coming up to you and going, "Yeah, we built this game for that, and we're doing games for this kind of stuff." And in the chat, we were talking about
yeah.
games, that people have done before. So can you talk to this question of how you put these pieces together? How do you deal with regulatory and people's immediate concerns about that? And secondly, how do you deal with all the different kinds of ways that people go about doing projects in the company and pulling
Yeah.
that all into one best practice?
Well, your first question about the rules and regulations. I think that's the nice thing about gamification. It is a really opportunity to bring gaming within your normal processes, and these normal processes are leading concerning how to implement regulation in there. So I don't see it as something doing something which is contradicting with these regulations. Of course, there are a lot of regulations about privacy and about what you can do with your data of your employees. That's still a problem. And if it's not a regulation, there also are internal boards which don't really feel happy about it. I think that's still a bit of a longer road to make them see that giving people data about their own performance really helps them to give them that insight. And about external regulation, actually, there are a lot of serious game designers here within the Netherlands who are making a lot of money by building games, explaining people how to use that regulation. And we ourselves had one project where we had to implement new privacy regulations, and they used Drillster for that. And Drillster is just an open software which is there online, and, which is a gamified learning software. So you can still do it, and it's also an opportunity. Second question about all these different projects. Yeah, that is of course a challenge. First thing is these projects are there, and that is really good. I'm really happy about it. So every time when I hear about a project which I didn't know about, first is of course, oh, okay, how am I going to connect this? But second is good that you're doing it. And I use our internal social networks like Jammer to communicate a lot. I send out newsletters where I give an overview of the project I know of, and I invite people to bring their project to us. So I really visualize that network. So I show my colleagues which projects are going on, who is responsible for the project, what it's about, so they uh, can connect themselves. Um, and people have to know that you're there. So I used a lot of again communication interns because they have really nice ideas about smart communication within the organization. They came up with all these nice promotions, let us know things to, well, reach out. So that's what I try to do. Try to reach all these people so that they know there is a gamification hub in Rabobank, which they can go to, ask the questions, bring up their projects. It takes a lot of effort, but it's easier as you easier
As
and
you keep
easier
going.
along the way.
Now, what about
Yeah,
the other side of it? So you're spending a lot of time, working with people who are interested in the subject and giving workshops to people. People are coming to you. Now, what about the
yeah,
other side? You're in an organization where there's lots of people who probably, and I'm not saying this about Rabobank, but big companies usually have a lot of people in them that just say no right away, reflexively, without even
yeah,
thinking about it. The answer is always no. That isn't going to work. That's never going to work. This isn't, and money, this isn't about fun. Money is not supposed to be fun. Money is work.
mhm,
And on top of it, you're in the Netherlands, has a reputation for taking money very seriously. How do you navigate and thread, yes, this kind of
yeah.
energy in an organization like a big Dutch bank?
Well, first, if people really say no and they're not open for any conversation at all, I have the luxury that there are a lot of people who are. So that is the upside of being a big organization. And also, it's about stakeholder management. Really, I try to if I really want to go do something with a certain person who is against gamification, I'm going to look around his network. All right, who do I know that he does know, which I can talk about it with gamification and have these use these people to show him the added value of it. Because of course I'm not a very senior manager within an organization, so some people don't know me, don't know what I do, they don't know what gamification does. Sometimes they sort of don't feel very comfortable with the word of gamification. So I have to use other people, where they do feel comfortable with, to have them understand what gamification can bring to them. So social networking within your organization is key for this.
So I think that's a very good observation, right? Work with the people who are more open-minded rather than maybe
Yeah,
attack the people who are immediately naysayers. So before we run out of
yeah,
time, we talked about the mortgage example. We talked a lot about the process. You mentioned the term gamification, which there was some chatter from people about, whether that creates some conflict and endless conversation. What about other projects
yeah,
at Rabobank that are kind of interesting? I know that we've seen a World Food Game. You want to talk about that, or you want to
yeah.
talk about any of the other projects that have come up since everything started?
Uh, well, the World Food Game was actually a project 2 years ago. I managed that project, and what we did there is very cool. We set just some boundaries about what the game should be about, and with that, I went to schools and other organizations where children between 12 and 25 were, and we let them design the game. So we had people designing the concept of the game, the story of the game. We had graphical design students to design the visual designs, of course, and then they really built the game. It was a very cool co-creation project, but that was actually a serious game. So I don't, which was 2 years ago. What we're doing now, as we speak, we are completely virtualizing a lot of our services, and we try to continue what we started with the mortgage process. So. Uh, um, as a bank, we are of course providing people something which they're not only always interested in. I mean, money is mostly important when you don't have it when you want it, but taking care of your financial situation while everything is okay is not very. People are not very engaged with it. So currently, we are doing a design project where we can help people to build a daily routine with their finances, so they don't uh, build up to a problem which you need to solve when it pops up, but they can continuously have control of their finance and
That
try to implement it in their daily finance. Yeah.
So that's very cool and definitely in sync with what a lot of people are trying to do over here, including some of the projects that I've been working on for other financial institutions around this idea of like, how do we
Hmm.
make money not feel like you're getting beaten up and you're failing all the time, right? Rather
Yeah.
make, your experience with money maybe a little bit more positive. Can I ask you
Yeah.
one last
Yeah.
question before we run out of time? This from
Sure.
Sasha, and Sasha sort of, to some extent, he's your contemporary, over at McKinsey, and a really, really good question actually from you, Sasha. If we continue to have Martin, if we haven't lost him, of how we deal with, people who are overly excited about gamification, but maybe have the wrong expectations of it, which I think is a very, very interesting question. I'll tell you that from my perspective, when I'm, frequently when I have to deal with clients, for example, around this subject of expectation management, frequently I have to do a complete reset of people's expectations around gamification. And now that we have Maarten back, we'll get his take on it. Sasha's question,
Yeah.
Maarten, was really, many people are increasingly, 2 years ago when we talked about gamification, people maybe didn't know what it was. And so the first time they hear about it is from you. But many people now have an idea of what it is. And for many people, it's points, badges, and leaderboards, or points, badges, and rewards Sasha's asking
Yeah.
about. How do you deal with your colleagues who, when they come to you, they're like, yes, I know what I want to do, and their idea is totally terrible?
Yeah. Well, first, of course, I try to channel that enthusiasm because they're still enthusiastic and they have to maintain it. But I sit together with them and try to sit down. All right, you want to make it fun, which is really great. But why do you want to make it fun? What's the problem underneath it? And I actually use their experience with the target group to provide me information. So I put them in a sort of an expert role, and they starting telling me about their people they want to engage with. And from that on, I building it up again from the root cause and the problem, and start building it up and show them different kind of mechanics which they are also over enthusiastic about. So don't just tell them, right, these point badge and leaderboards, they're don't go with it. Just yeah, try to go to that root cause with them, and from there on, show them different examples of gamification, and they will keep their enthusiasm.
Awesome. That's great feedback. And if you'd like to keep following Maarten and you want to know more about his work as a gamification hub leader, project leader at Rabobank, you can follow him on Twitter, Maarten, M-A in the sort of Dutch spelling.
Yeah.
And you can follow Rabobank, Rabobank at on Twitter. Maarten Molenaar, thank you so much for being with us today. Thanks for
Thank
joining.
you.
Very, very exciting. And all of you, thanks for joining us as well. I hope that you'll come and see me and Maarten and about 50 other folks, including Professor Vijay Fogg, at G Summit this June in San Francisco. The 10th through the 13th, it's gsummit.com, and you can register with the code GAMREV to save $200. Next week, we'll be back with you with more Gamification Revolution online at your Spreecast channel. I hope to see you then. In the meantime, everyone, keep having fun. Take care.
Take care.